Before we dive into our explanation about MEXC, first a short introduction to show you some proof. I've been investing with my DEGIRO account for years, and as you can see, I still have assets there. I have a second one, another DEGIRO account, also with assets in it. And every month I share a full portfolio update, including both ETFs and stocks. You can subscribe to this channel for that, and then you'll basically follow along with what we do in terms of buying stocks and ETFs. After that, many years later, I created a business portfolio for my holding company at Interactive Brokers. What we see here on the screen looks a bit different from the MEXEM platform because Interactive Brokers is actually the parent company with the platform, but it's a bit more extensive. For example, Portfolio Analyst looks a bit more extensive and takes a moment to load, which isn't the fastest right now. And here you actually get a completely different kind of overview than what you see at MEXC. But I have transferred my Interactive Brokers account to MEXC. If you want to do that too, you can. You can do that through your account, and it's also very easy to look up online how to switch from Interactive Brokers to MEXC. Or you can call MEX customer service, which is super easy to reach and friendly, and they can help you with that. One small tip, in our description you'll find a special partnership link with MEXC. With that, you get 100 euros in free transaction fees. It's basically 100 euros as a kind of bonus, but you only use it when you start trading, so you get a discount on your first 100 euros in transaction and conversion fees. So to get access to that, you actually need to click the link if you don't have an account yet. If you already have an account, it's still possible. What you need to do then is find your number, which you can actually find in your portal. If you go to your account, you'll find your number, and you can send that to MEXC just to the customer service email address, and then say, yes, I came here via Happy Investors. I'd like to get the 100 euros in transaction fees added. So, if you switch to MEXC, this is what it looks like. And you can see that my position at MEXC has only just started since April 2025. I spent more than a year at Interactive Brokers first. I still have an account there, but I also transferred to MEXC. Let's take a look at how the platform works, but before that, there's another step, which is creating an account. Well, I've already created my account, so I can't show you how that works anymore. If you create a personal account, it's super simple. If you create a business account, it's a bit more complex. There are more forms you need to fill out. I had to do that as well. Yeah, it just takes a little more time. The advantage is, I did it at Interactive Brokers. Well, their customer service was unreachable. I had to do everything myself, and at MEXC you can just call and they'll basically guide you through the whole process. So if you're talking about customer service, which is really, really bad at DEGIRO. But when it comes to customer service at MEXC, they actually help you out. So especially for entrepreneurs, it can be interesting to open a business account at MEXC. And in the Netherlands, there aren't that many business accounts or providers for business accounts. For example, I think Links has stopped. You used to have DEGIRO, but they've stopped offering it too. Maybe it's still possible with other brokers, but I can't really think of any off the top of my head. However, at MEXC, it's still possible. Of course, there are also plenty of drawbacks, and one of them is that the platform is a bit slow and doesn't always work that smoothly. But we'll talk more about that in a bit. Once your account is created, of course you'll want to make a transfer, and for that you'll need to deposit money, so let's take a look at how to do that. So, after you created an account, the first thing you do is transfer money, and then you'll see this. Basically, you're on your homepage and you'll still see 0 euros here. You actually don't have anything yet. Here you can see your account. You'll also find your number here, and you can see your settle cash. Yeah, you don't have any of that yet, of course, but here you'll see the option to deposit or withdraw. Basically, you can just click on deposit funds, and what you'll see here is a balance in euros, and I also have some in dollars. Recently, I transferred a bit more from euros to dollars because the exchange rates are favorable right now. That's definitely something to keep in mind if you're investing in dollars, so pay attention to that if you're Dutch or Belgian. Deposit funds is pretty self-explanatory, and here you see convert currency. Convert currency simply means converting your currency to another currency. Convert all to euro is apparently a kind of shortcut. If you have multiple currencies, you could instantly switch everything back to your base currency, which is euros in this case. You can see that here as well. Base currency deposit funds. I heard from one of our clients at Happy Investors that you can set up a link with Rabobank, but they put some kind of block on it. No idea exactly why. I'm not going to click on this because then you just see my bank information. You can just transfer money manually. That's what I do myself too. There's nothing wrong with that. Usually, it still shows up in your account after just a few minutes. If you click here on deposit and then find instructions, you'll need to register your bank, your IBAN, and then you'll find instructions. Super simple. It's clear about how you need to transfer your money. So just a manual transfer. Nothing wrong with that. You can see it in the fees as well. I think it's even free, at least the first one within 30 days. So yeah, there might be extra costs if you, I don't know, transfer money every week, but I'm not sure about that. You can always check that yourself. What else is there? I'll skip over the details a bit. It's about the main points to keep it as simple as possible. Here too, you'll find the E number again. That's really for customer contact communication. Do you always have to provide the E number? Well, you've transferred money. First of all, congratulations. And of course, let's invest carefully and wisely now, because we can lose our investment. We don't want to make mistakes, so at some point, you've bought positions. I'll show you how that works in a moment. And once you've bought those positions, you'll find them in your portfolio. Then you click on portfolio, and this is the first thing you'll see. This overview here. What we see is our net liquidity is 95K. Our buying power is 20K. That's basically the cash we're keeping on hand at the moment. And that is actually the same as excess liquidity. Our daily P&L simply means daily profit or loss. You should never look at the day-to-day level anyway. He just happens to be in the green at 260 euros, and we see the unrealized profit and loss. That is plus 5,700. Of course, this also includes currency exchanges, but that is something for later when you are more advanced. So we've already seen the cash report. Here we see the positions. Well, they're all nicely in the green. That's a good thing. At least, from my perspective. I recently bought some shares and I also shared that in a new portfolio update. So follow and subscribe to our channel investors for that. We've also launched a new concept. It's called Win-Win Investing. You can find all the information on our website. Since 2022, we've been achieving demonstrably higher returns than both the S&P 500 and other ETFs. And we do that based on a fixed methodology. I myself also invest almost full-time. I have a background in business strategy, both at the University of Applied Sciences and university level. I learn a lot. I read a ton, daily or yearly, really a lot. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've also been investing myself for more than 10 years. With ups and downs, I invest with my own money. I know what it's like to lose a lot of money, but also to win a lot of money. And one thing I can assure you, just invest simply for the long term. Because money is really just a side issue, and when you have more than enough, you'll start to understand that it truly is secondary. And the most important thing is just do something you really love, your passion. And if you can make some money with it, that's awesome. Often, if you get really good at something, you'll easily make a lot of money anyway, so don't worry about it. It'll all work out. Of course, though, it does require dedication and discipline. And with investing too, you need discipline for long-term investing. All right, we're going to buy our first stock, and we'll just pick a random number or a random stock. One that's popular is ASML. We all know that one. And if you type in ASML, you'll see different. What is it actually? Different results? And what's listed after it is usually the stock exchange. So here we see ASML holding bonds. Bonds, those are bonds. Well, we don't want any of those. Of course, we want stock, but you do see a whole list of stocks that are available. So the question is usually always, which one should you actually get? Well, I already mentioned, let me go back for a second, whether we're buying in euros or in dollars. That makes a difference in terms of transaction costs. So that's something you want to consider for yourself. Now I'm selecting ASML from the exchange. NASDAQ, that's an American exchange. You can also see here that the price is listed in dollars. If I buy it now, I'm buying in dollars. Does that mean conversion costs if I choose a different exchange? Then we see that this one is in euros. So at DEGIRO, these exchanges have different names again. That's a bit annoying, I have to say, with the abbreviations, but I think this is the Amsterdam Exchange or the ASX. And here we see the euro currency. You can also see that I've been investing for over a year now, but sometimes there are all these little details. Yeah, you just learn to deal with that. It's really just a matter of doing it. And sometimes I have to figure things out myself too. There are probably a lot of features I still don't know about, but honestly, that's not all that interesting. The point is to simply achieve good returns, and that comes down to doing solid research. Investing for the long term in high quality companies that are undervalued or in ETFs. Simple passive investing, and the rest is really just secondary. But I get it, you want to learn. That's what we're here for. Now, if you want to buy ASML, you'll find a transaction history below. Well, I haven't bought ASML through MEXEM, so if I show other stocks in my portfolio, you'll see the transaction history here. You see a lot of information. What I personally use, and I think it's nice to show, are the fundamentals. I always like that, because what's unique about MEXEM compared to other brokers is that they have the Morningstar connection. Morningstar is a research company, and if it says Analyst Equity Report here instead of Quantitative Analyst, it means the analyst has prepared an investment report. So they've taken a thorough look at it. What's nice to see is whether it has an economic moat, yes or no. And white basically means it has a strong competitive advantage. You also have narrow, or you have none. Narrow means a limited competitive advantage. White is a long-term strong competitive advantage if you want to invest. Just like Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, you should always do your own research. But consulting tools can be useful, and I use a lot of tools. Those costs are more than 10,000 euros per year, but we can afford that because we are a company. We create stock analyses that fortunately help people achieve higher returns. Of course, there are ups and downs, but there are people who are satisfied with it. So we also have high customer reviews, for which we are grateful. We can afford that as a company. And one of the tools I always use myself to quickly check is the Morningstar Fair Value Estimate. This is the intrinsic value calculation. You see a price here of 660 euros, and according to Morningstar, the intrinsic value is higher in the long term. That means this is a plus point. And in this way, you can actually gather several tools around you, basically with the standard stock checklist. By the way, I have a stock checklist for you that you can download for free on our website. It's incredible how much value you get from this video, and then you can just start researching stocks step by step. You also see the definitive ratings here. That's basically just a kind of Wall Street ratings. I also use this one myself very often when there are a lot of analysts and they still have a consensus, in this case with an average price target or a target price that's a bit higher than the current price. That's also a favorable signal, but you should always do your own research, and especially when it comes from Wall Street, it doesn't mean everything. Well, there's a lot of information here under company info. Most of these things I haven't even looked at myself, because I use other tools. But you see key ratios, and you can see whether they pay dividends, the payout ratio. These are all details. I explained those to you in other videos on our channel. Here you have investors again. So we're not going to talk about that right now. But what we want to do now is buy ASML. So, we go back to quotes, and here we can choose to buy or sell. If we want to buy ASML, then we press buy, and I'll just move myself to the left. Okay, so ASML is at $660. And let's say you have 10,000 euros to start with and you want to buy a maximum of 5% in ASML, then instead of selecting a number of shares, you just choose euros and you can indicate, like, okay, I want to invest a maximum of 5%. So I actually only want to invest 500 euros. Then you basically buy 0.75 shares. An advantage of MEXEM compared to DEGIRO is that with DEGIRO, you always have to buy whole shares. With MEXEM, you can also buy fractional shares. So not necessarily 1, but 0.1, 0.7, whatever. Now, that's great. Here's the price. If you want to buy it immediately, then you set it to market order, time in force. It doesn't matter because this is a market order. It will basically be executed immediately at the price that's valid right now, at this moment. You click on buy order and you buy ASML. Now, let's say you think, based on your research and price movements, and as you get a bit more advanced, you think ASML is a great company, but I expect it will drop for a bit, say to 560. That's, for example, this drop here on the screen in April 2025. In this example, What you can do then is select a limit order, and you either use a market order or a limit order. The other types of orders are really that interesting. They're also not used that often. In this case, your limit price is 560 because you want to buy at a maximum of 560. Now, it's at 500 euros. That's perfect, so you'll buy a few more shares as you can see because the price is lower. But now you do need to set the time and force to good till cancel. In other words, this order remains valid until it gets cancelled. At DEGIRO, I believe it gets cancelled after, I think, 3 months. With MEXEM, I'm not entirely sure, so it could be that it expires after a certain period. Then you simply just place a new limit order. Or ASML never drops below the price of 600 again and just keeps going up. Yeah, in that case, it is what it is, but then you haven't bought anything either. Basically, there are a few more types of orders. Personally, I don't find it that interesting to talk about. Let's say we've bought ASML. What's important to know is that selling works the same way. Just for convenience's sake, you bought a share of ASML. Then, of course, you need to set the quantity to 1 here. And if you want to sell it immediately, you're done with it or you want to take your profit, well, great, congratulations. Then you click on Sell Order. There are also some other functions here. I don't use those at the moment. I still want to look into what exactly the costs and benefits are. But basically, you don't need to use them at all. So, here you've sold it. But let's say you've now bought ASML at 660 and you expect, well, if it goes up to 750 according to this chart, I'll be satisfied. For whatever reason. And of course, that's not really a good reason to sell. Ideally, you want to hold on for the very long term and especially keep your winners. But if that's what you want, that's totally your choice. So, you would set the price limit at exactly 750, and yes, you would set it here to good till cancel, and then it will only ever sell at precisely 750. Now, a valuable tip I'd like to give you is that, in principle, you buy shares for the long term. We're now zooming in or out on the chart, and in the past, ASML has had a price of 1,000 euros, so that 750 as a selling price might not even be a good price. Let's just assume that ASML can still grow much more than it is now. So, what will it do in the long run? Will this price rise to 1,000 euros and beyond? Suppose it reaches 1,000 euros and you think, well, then I've made quite a lot of profit. I want to at least lock in my gains. But one tip I can give you is, never sell your winners too early. Of course, there are some caveats, but never sell too early. So what you want to do when it hits that target is this. What you can do then is set a stop loss earlier. So you go to sell, click on stop, and now you set a stop loss. Basically, in this case, you could set the stop price at, for example, minus 20% of the current price at 800 euros. Why that minus 20%? Because in the short term, prices always go up and down, and it could happen that it drops further, for example. For instance, let's say it goes to 930. But you don't want it to sell immediately then. No, you actually want to keep holding it, in principle. But if it does drop to 800, it will sell right away and you'll lock in your profit. If it always stays above that 1,000 over the next 30 years, and it goes up to 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, then you'll still own ASML for the long term. And with this stop loss order, which you keep adjusting upwards as the price rises, you make sure to let your winners run. Basically, this works the same way for a stock as it does for an ETF. Here you see stocks that I've looked up or want to buy. A well-known ETF is, I'll just pick a random example, IBDA. Here again, you see different exchanges. MEX is Mexico, LSE is London, and AEB is Amsterdam. We want to buy the IBDA ETF. That's the iShares Core World ETF, a stock fund with a lot of different shares. And here you see exactly the same thing again. And if you want to sell, with an ETF you'll more often just use a market order because the price doesn't fluctuate all that much. And that's how you can buy and sell very easily. What happens then is you buy the stock, and it ends up in your portfolio as, for example, the Black Science and Technology Fund. A CEF is a closed-end fund. That's something different from an ETF, which is an exchange-traded fund. That's also a detail I'm not going to explain right now. You see those little arrows here. Then I could. Some time ago, actually quite a while back, it's not showing you properly. Somewhere in 2021 I had already bought it, and I explained that in another video, and I don't see any dots there. Then we can just check the transaction history. Oh, it only goes up to 2024. I can show you that in a moment. Anyway, I sold it here and there. That's why you see those dots pointing down, those arrows in it. Road? I can do him. I can't buy it anymore, and the reason for that is because it says trading restricted, and this product requires a KID, and a KID is actually a kind of information document. What's going on here? Because in the past, I was able to buy this and this fund, and you can see that here as well. I have received all sorts of payments over the past years, and here I sold. And June 2021 as an example. Well, what happened here is that when I bought in 2021, back then, I tried it out to the max, but I wasn't completely enthusiastic yet, probably because of the complexity and I was impatient. And back then, this fund was still available. But very often you see with ETFs, or also stocks, but especially ETFs that are issued in America and don't have an information document in Europe. So that's due to regulations. Well, then they're not allowed to formally offer that product in Europe. And you see this very often with exchange-traded funds. And then you get this annoying message that trading is restricted. You simply just can't buy it. And this is also the case with DEGIRO or whatever other brokers. You simply just can't buy it. That has nothing to do with MEXEM or with other platforms, because MEXEM is actually the most comprehensive platform there is for stocks and ETFs in Europe. You can buy almost everything there, but an ETF that was issued in America, you simply just can't buy it in Europe. So it's really that simple. Now, you saw that BlackRock paid out dividends. At a certain point, you bought shares and then, of course, you also received some dividends. At some point, you have a portfolio filled with stocks and ETFs, and hopefully you've been able to achieve nice returns or are in the process of doing so. You can go to Performance under Portfolio, and there you can actually see what the annual return is. Cumulative rate of return, and I've set it to 1 year for now. Here you see performance by sector, and you also see the distribution across industries. We see here that long basically just means that all the positions I have are for the long term. Of that, 75K is invested and about 20K is cash, and you can also see the different industries. I showed this at the beginning of the video. I also have the DEGIRO account. I also have a second MEXEM account, but actually 2 DEGIRO accounts. One is joint with my girlfriend, so we only do ETFs in that one, and the others are my own portfolios where I have other types of investments. So what I actually do is, here we see a position, for example, in Grifols. The cost basis is $8,000, so I bought $8,000 worth, and you see the same with Kindrill. That means for me, in my total investment capital, I should say investment capital, sorry, it's 2% converted, so it's only 2%. So it might be a large amount for some people, but if you think in percentages, it's only 2%. The iShares Oil and Gas, that's an ETF. So I also have an ETF here. I have a bit more in that one. You can see the cost basis is $24,000 and currently the market value is $27,000, so it has gone up. And you can see that reflected here as well, because the unrealized profit and loss is almost $3,000. It's still unrealized because you haven't sold yet. If you sell now, then you've realized this. And also, if a stock is in the red. I don't have an example of that here right now, but in the DEGIRO account there are a few that are in the red. And if you haven't sold yet, you also haven't taken a loss. That's why it's an advantage if you're a long-term investor. Companies can always recover, so don't get too hung up on short-term results. But we can clearly see here that despite all of these obviously green numbers and very good investments over just a relatively few months, my overall 1-year performance is still at a negative 2.8%. Break time equals 0.5s/. This is quite a significant point to consider. And that's really strange. After all, When I go to the home page, I see that my biggest deposit was actually made in April 4th. Well, you can clearly see that on the screen, 92,800, and by now my portfolio has grown to about 95,000. So what I don't quite understand is, okay, why does it still show around minus 2.6% here? One thing that is important, of course, is the impact of dollars. I have quite a bit in dollars, and I also still have dollars in my account. And at this particular moment, the dollar isn't doing well compared to the euro. So then you get currency risk if the dollar drops against the euro. Then your assets shrink because you converted a lot into dollars. At least, that's what I've done now. And you can see a clear decline here. So yeah, if the dollar or the euro becomes stronger again against the euro in the long run, which is of course what you hope for, then my assets will increase again, purely based on the exchange rate between the dollar and the euro. So that's definitely a very important point to keep in mind if you're investing in currencies other than the euro. Since you're Dutch or Belgian, how can you see that? If you go to performance reports, that's actually the last part of this video. Then you will find a number of reports. You can go to statements, and here you will find some options. And what I actually wanted to know is, what is my realized profit or loss? So at realized summary. But you can see some other things like activity. Can you see a number of things? And of course, what you might want to know is the transaction history. That's always good to know. Transaction history. I'll set it to year to date for a moment. And here you can find all transactions, including the commission fees, in other words, the transaction costs you've incurred. And as I already mentioned, the biggest advantage of MEXEM is lower commission fees, for example in dollars. I recently bought in Griffels, and for quite a hefty price. And we see that the commission fees are only 3.8. So that's not a lot, considering the amount. The same goes for other purchases, as we can see here. And you can see some other transactions as well. So indeed, that BlackRock I sold. And here you can see the commission that was paid. And this way, you can actually look back and see all the transaction costs. So here you do see that FX translation on profit and loss. That's not great, so currency loss, so keep that in mind. But yeah, of course it can also go up again, and that's really the whole thing with the dollar and euro. It always goes up and down, of course. But for me, it does mean that I have to time my switch between dollars and euros carefully. And as you can see here, in 2022 the dollar suddenly rose a lot compared to the euro. I really benefited from that, for example. There are some other reports as well, so let's take a look at those. Well, finally, the last part, taxes. That comes up every year, of course. What you have to declare is, of course, your income and your assets. You'll need all kinds of bank details, but also your account information from your investment platforms. Plus, you have to check the dividends you've received and how much dividend tax you've paid. Because you can declare that and then you can claim it back. And then there's the difference between private and business. You might think that if you go to tax reports, so under performance and reports, you go to tax, and there you'll find the necessary information. But it's not that straightforward. You do find a dividend report here. What works better for me, or at least how I do it, is this. I go to Statements Activity and there I select the year 2024. Through Custom Date Range, you can simply download it for the year 2024. Optionally with some reports listed below the text, but I don't think that's necessary, and then you send that to your accountant. As for business portfolios, if you have to do it yourself, well, then you have to do it yourself. But if you have an accountant, you can just forward this, and then they'll have enough information to process everything for your business investment account. That's it for MEXEM. There are probably still things I haven't shown, but this is the basics, the foundation for when you're a beginner investor. There are other things as well, like under research you'll find a number of items. It's worth it to take your time and go through them at your own pace. It's really fun to figure all of this out, of course. There's also an advanced platform from MEXEM and interactive brokers that you can download. It's more for training type stuff, which you don't need as a beginner investor. That's why I'm not showing it in this tutorial video. This video is already long enough. Do you have any questions? Let me know. Do you have any comments or suggestions for improvement? Let me know that as well. I'm always open to positive suggestions for improving the use of investment accounts and things like that, so feel free to share them. Other people will probably find them useful too. So thank you for watching and for your time. I always appreciate you, and I'll see you next time.